You muted my soul. They turned up the volume. You watched me fade. They watched me bloom. You feared my wounds. They kissed them. You gave me silence. They gave me songs. You lost my fire. They danced in it. You waited too long. They arrived too right. You called it drama. They called it depth. You left. They arrived with intention. You dismissed my ache. They read it like scripture. You needed space. They needed me. You walked away. They walked in. You tired of my heart. They memorized it. You demanded silence. They asked for truth. You feared love. They became it. You watched me drown. They learned to swim. You ghosted me. They grounded me. You saw burden. They saw brilliance. You wanted ease. They wanted everything. You forgot the story. They wrote a new one. You turned cold. They burned honest. You vanished when it hurt. They stayed through storms. You walked away from the flame. They lit a fire. You stopped answering. They started asking. You underestimated me. They cherished every scar. You blinked. They stared. You turned love into silence. They turned silence into safety. You ignored the warnings. They followed my whisper. You wanted peace without passion. They brought both. You kept secrets. They kept promises. You made me doubt my magic. They made me believe again. You forgot my heart. They memorized every beat. You gave up on us. They gave in to me. You looked past me. They looked into me. You feared the fire. They became flame. You waited for comfort. They craved chaos with me. You wanted light. They wanted the shadows too. You closed the chapter. They turned the page. You wanted perfection. They adored my damage. You kept me waiting. They caught me falling. You avoided the mess. They danced in it. You called me too much. They couldn't get enough. You pulled away. They leaned in. You gave me distance. They gave me presence. You chose later. They chose now. You saw cracks. They saw constellations. You feared breaking me. They helped rebuild. You needed time. They made time. You misread my silence. They listened to it. You gave instructions. They gave affection. You grew cold. They grew curious. You turned away. They turned toward. You lost interest. They sparked wonder. You mistook my loyalty for weakness. They honored it as power. You wanted less noise. They played symphonies. You disappeared when I cried. They cried with me. You blamed timing. They made it divine. You asked for space. They created connection. You walked past my poetry. They recited every line. You delayed answers. They became the answer. You turned off the light. They became it. You watched me lose hope. They offered their own. You edited me. They embraced the raw cut. You called me intense. They called me sacred. You said I changed. They said I healed. You wanted escape. They wanted roots. You saw my flaws. They saw my future. You craved convenience. They craved depth. You denied my pain. They held it. You stepped back. They stepped forward. You ignored my tears. They read them like letters. You feared commitment. They feared losing me. You wanted a break. They wanted forever. You shrugged off my storms. They found beauty in the thunder. You wanted fun. They wanted forever. You laughed at my dreams. They dreamed with me. You heard noise. They heard music. You wanted a lover. They became a witness. You tried to tame me. They loved my wild. My dear, you stopped looking at me like magic. So someone else started. I didn't cheat. I just got tired of begging you to notice me. Your silence made someone else's voice irresistible. While you ignored my storms, someone else danced in my rain. You left a vacancy in me that someone else dared to fill. I waited, but you watched me fade, so someone else brought color back. You forgot my worth. They reminded me. I didn't plan to fall again. You just stopped catching me. You gave me space, and someone else built a home there. You let go slowly. They grabbed me instantly. It wasn't betrayal, it was survival. You starved me of affection. They fed my soul. You made me lonely next to you. They made me seen from afar. I didn't leave for better. I left to feel wanted. You paused. They pursued. While you kept secrets, someone else kept showing up. I craved your eyes. They craved my soul. You stopped choosing me. They never hesitated. I looked for you in your absence and found them instead. I waited in silence. They answered my ache. You loved the idea of me. They loved my wounds too. You became cold. They became fire. Your detachment was louder than their hello. You watched me break. They started building. You said later. They said now. You held me loosely. They held me wholly. You touched my body. They touched my pain. You forgot my pores. They sat inside them. You taught me neglect. They taught me gravity. You thought I'd always wait. I thought I'd never leave. I didn't fall out of love. I just stopped shrinking. You taught me distance. They closed it. While you tested me, they treasured me. You confused comfort with effort. They didn't. You were my silence. They became my scream. I begged you for presence. They arrived without asking. You were a lesson. They became a prayer. You feared my intensity. They called it home. You lost me in your routine. They found me in my ruins. You made me invisible. They made me impossible to ignore. Your touch became absence. Theirs became truth. I stayed until I became forgettable. They remembered me at first glance. You drained me. They dreamed with me. You stopped listening. They spoke to my soul. I stopped explaining myself to you when they understood the unspoken. I left the familiar to feel loved again. You numbed me. They woke me up. You wanted a version of me. They wanted it all. You waited for me to leave. I waited for a reason to stay. You saw flaws. They saw fire. You gave crumbs. They served stars. You overlooked me. They looked deeper. You wanted peace without effort. They fought for connection. You outgrew my love. They expanded it. I didn't settle. I stopped suffering. You forgot the little things. They made them sacred. You loved me quietly. They worshipped loudly. I stopped chasing. They stopped running. You wanted me perfect. They wanted me raw. You thought I'd return. I found resurrection. I mourned you until someone else resurrected me. You closed your heart. They kept theirs open. You pushed me away. They pulled me in. You stayed comfortable. They created fire. You were a void. They became a voice. You shut the door. They lit a window. You made me small. They saw me massive. You held me with fear. They held me with faith. You erased me slowly. They painted me whole. I whispered goodbye while someone else whispered stay. You made love feel cold. They made it holy. I begged for your warmth. They gave it freely. You were a shadow. They were a sunrise. You made me doubt. They made me remember. You didn't break me. They healed what you bruised. I looked in your eyes and saw absence. Theirs mirrored fire. You gave up mid-sentence. They wrote new chapters. You forgot the spark. They became the storm. You made me lonely in love. They made me loved in loneliness. If this touched your soul, don't scroll. Like, comment your favorite quote and subscribe for more. You ghosted my heart. They haunted my soul in the best way. You were indecision. They were clarity. I stopped waiting to be chosen. You left love on red. They read between the wounds. You delayed forever. They offered now.